Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Garuda Prakashan and the author, it is my privilege to welcome you all to the launch of Major General Dr. G.D. Bakshi, SMVSM retired, 45th book, Indian Strategic Culture, the Mahabharatan and Kautilyan Ways of War. The great validity and value of traditional knowledge systems has been acknowledged by our new education policy. Each nation has its own forms of art, dance and culture. What is not so well known is the tremendous amount of knowledge on the art of war that has been available in India. Western scholars have questioned the very existence of a strategic culture in India. That is what we will be discussing today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely grateful to Shri Ajit Doval, Kirti Chakra, the NSA, for taking the time out from his very busy and taxing schedule to be our chief guest today. If India is perceived as a global power of consequence today, it is in large measure due to the helmsmanship of India's national security by Mr. Ajit Doval. We are also grateful to Mr. Sushil Pandit, eminent TV personality and activist, for agreeing to be the discussant. We have in the audience among our distinguished guests Lieutenant General Karan Yadav, Vice Admiral Sahai, Major General Ravi Arora, Rear Admiral Radhakrishnan, Mr. Gehlot, Director Ambience Group, Mr. Arun Thapar, Director History Channel. We are grateful to each and every one of you who have graced us with their presence today. May I now request the NSA, Shri Ajit Doval and Mr. Pandit to kindly accept bouquets of flowers as token of our gratitude. Flowers may fade away, but books are forever. Keeping in Garuda's tradition, they would also like to present selected books to our esteemed guests. May I now request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly release the book. May we also request them to launch the Garuda's Marketplace May I now request the author to give us a presentation about the book.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today for the release of the book Indian Strategic Culture, the Mahabharatan and Kautilyan Way of War. And as the compere said, Dr. Purnima Bakshi Kanwar said, Kautilya was not a theorist. He was a practitioner of the art and science of national security. And therefore, we could not have had a more eminent and qualified chief guest than Shri Ajit Doval himself a practitioner of the art and science of national security for the past decade and well before that as the head of India's intelligence bureau. We could not have asked for a more qualified person to preside over this book launch than him, and I'm extremely grateful to you, sir. You've been so kind as always to grace the occasion, take time out of your very busy and taxing schedule. Sir, some 2 decades back, a series of Western scholars like George Stanham, Stephen Peter Rosen had come to India to study India's strategic culture. After much research and inquiry, they concluded very sadly that India has no strategic culture, no tradition of focused strategic military thought and analysis, and they blamed especially the Hindu and the Buddhist part of our history for this lack of a strategic culture. Then we had Stephen Peter Rosen and his very famous book, Societies and Military Power, India and His Armies, and he said that there is no primordial strategic military culture in India, and he too concluded that India lacked a tradition of strategic thinking. He concluded that the size of the Indian armies mentioned in the Mahabharata, mentioned in the Arthashastra, mentioned by Megasthenes, the Greek ambassador, was a fiction of the imagination. It was unrealistic. And he quoted Martin van Creveld to state that given the state of land communication, command and control means logistical infrastructure, you couldn't, mass such large sized armies in those periods. But the same gentleman very conveniently told to us, informed us that the Roman legions, when they fought the major battle, they were about 240,000 strong. From a population base that was much larger than that of the Indo-Gangetic plain. So we have always noticed this very seminal bias against Hindu India and Buddhist India in particular, and feeling that there is a total lack of strategic culture or focused, cohesive military thinking. So what exactly is a strategic culture? What are we talking about when we say strategic culture? Kerry Longhurst, well-known American author, he defines strategic culture as a distinctive body of beliefs, attitudes and practices regarding the use of force. The most salient part of this definition is a strategic culture is persistent over time and it tends to outlast the era of its inception. That is critical. It has to have a tradition of focused strategic thought going over the millennia. It's not short-term affair. The simple fact of the matter is, unfortunately, the colonial thinking, colonial historiography has so severely distorted the perception about India and its past that we are still facing that problem. And the problem faced by George Stanham and Stephen Rosencrantz was that they relied on colonial historiography to analyze the past and present of India. And quite obviously that is the place where you go wrong from the very outset. Colonial historiography was rather focused on the immediate past of the ahimsa, non-violence based struggle, so-called, for India's freedom. I'm afraid some historians, Indian historians, beg to differ. 26,000 men of the Indian National Army laid down their lives to make India free. And to call such a struggle, sir, is an insult to those martyrs and their families. Right? But that has clouded thinking about India as a Pacific country, neo-Buddhistic in its approach, ahimsa, spinning the wheel, etc. I'm afraid the truth is otherwise. The Vedas mention war, and I'll tell you how. And major wars, please. Ramayana is about a war. The invasion of Sri Lanka by the kingdoms of the north, by locally assembled tribal armed forces. It is about a war. The Mahabharata is about a major Armageddon that ends an age, a kind of an apocalypse that ends the age and commences a new one. It's about war. So let's get back and start right from the Vedas itself. You know, in the Vedas, colonial historiography has once again created a beautiful fiction. The Aryans were invaders who came from Central Asia. Hinduism is a foreign plant on the Indian soil. The Vedas came from outside and they fought with the Dravidians. The Dasyus are translated into dark-skinned Dravidians. And how the whites pushed out the blacks, so-called, all the way down south from the Vindhyas, across the Vindhyas into the triangle of the Dravid land, which is the junction of three seas. No Tamil literature includes any story of such a migration. Had such a migration of thousands of miles taken place, they would have carried the place names with them, the river names with them. Nothing of that sort. There is no proof. The actual fighting in the Vedic period was between the Indo-Aryans and the Indo-Iranians. Right? Indo-Aryans and the Indo-Iranians. The Indo-Iranians were called Dasas. In Iranian, in Persian, you don't pronounce the S, you pronounce it as H. When we say Soma, they say Homa. When we say Dasa, they say Daha. Daha. Right? And when we say Asur, they say Ahur. Ahur Mazda. In Iranian, Parsi Lord, Ahur Mazda, Ahura Mazda, he is the enemy of Indra and Manu. Manu is Manu. So the basic warfare was not between the Aryans and the Dravidians, but the basic warfare was between the Aryan tribes themselves. Why did they fight? They fought over ideological reason, how to worship the fire. The Zoroastrians said fire is sacred. You pollute the fire if you put any offerings into the fire of milk, ghee, whatever, samidha, whatever. You pollute the fire. And they were very annoyed with the Indo-Aryans, and those tribes were called the Deva tribes. These are the Asura and the Danava tribes. They were very angry as to why are you polluting the sacred fire, and therefore there was an ideological conflict. The second basis of this conflict in the Vedic age was the use of the psychotropic plant called Soma, which gave you ecstasy, which gave you creativity, which helped you to overcome all fear on the battlefield. It helped you to overcome all fear on the battlefield. Amazing psychotropic plant. And this was said to be the growth area of this plant was in the headwaters of the Satluj and the Bias. Right? This is the area of what we would call the foothills of Jammu, the foothills of Himachal Pradesh. Right? And this was the area of contestation that they fought over. Bitterly. It was bitterly fought over. The first major war in the Vedas is mentioned as the Dwadash Rajan Yuddha, War of the 20 Kings. Devadas, the ruler of Madhya Desh. There are very strange parallels between Chinese and Indian history. Madhya Desh, they call it Middle Kingdom. The ruler of Madhya Desh, that is the Saraswati in the tract, Devadas, he was the main protector of the Aryan faith, the Indo-Aryan faith of Stoma, of Havan. And that was the ideological conflict with the Asuras, the Ahuras. And incidentally, the people of Iran are still called Dahas, Dasas, corruption of Daha, right? So he invaded the Soma growing lands to capture them because Soma was being overused. Everybody wanted Soma. That was the basis of both the religious, the Indo-Iranian and the Indo-Aryan religions. So they fought over this area. There were supposed to be 100 fort cities that the Dasas had built in the lower Himalayan foothills. And we all know how rugged that terrain is. And Indra helped Devadas conquer, demolish 100 fort cities. And that is why he was called Purandara, the destroyer of forts, right? And he captured that. He drove the Indo-Iranians, the so-called Dasas, and the Danavas out of India. The Dasas went to Iran, settled down there. The Danavas, incidentally, their mother goddess is Danu, right? And everywhere they went, as they migrated out of India, they named their river after their mother goddess Danu. Don, Danube, Dniester, Donets. These are all rivers named after that mother goddess. And incidentally, sir, the mother goddess in Ireland is still called Danu. That just shows it is not an Aryan invasion into India, but the out of India theory is now gained total, dominance in as far as the field of historiography is concerned. The second war that takes place in the Vedic era is the Dasha Rajan Yuddha, the war of the 10 kings. And this is the time when his grandson Sudas, Devadas' grandson, he was again attacked. And once again the Indo-Iranian tribes, the Dasas, combined with some Danavas and the Paktiyas. Incidentally, sir, the Paktiyas are the Pashtuns. The major battle took place near Hari-Rupia, which is now Harappa. The major battle took place there, and he used, they dammed up a river, then they broke the dam to wash away these armies and cause them huge casualties. The casualty figures mentioned in this Vedic war are 60,000 to 1 lakh. And we are talking of that era, that population base, and look at the ferocity of the conflict that took place. Next, please. Now, there are two, schools of war in ancient India that has come down as our inheritance. There is the Mahabharatan school of the direct approach, the approach of attrition warfare, right? And this was called Dharma Yuddha. There is the Kautilyan approach, which is the exact opposite, which is the indirect approach in terms of B.H. Littlehart's theory, indirect approach strategy, the indirect approach, and that was called Kuta Yuddha. Kuta Yuddha, Kutil Buddhi, that's where it comes from, And what was the basic difference? The sources of the Dharma Yuddha were the Sadashiv Dhanar Veda, Bhishma school of war in the Bhishma Parv of the Mahabharata, right? And it was based on force. Armies get together in a flat plate and they throw one and they hurl one against the other till the other side is destroyed. No maneuver, no nothing, face on face, charge and destroy one another till the other side is destroyed, slaughtered to the last man. But a whole set of rules of chivalry. No attack on civilians, no attack on a man who is wounded, no attack on somebody who is fleeing the battlefield. Unfortunately, we have paid a very severe price, sir, for this chivalry. Prithviraj Chauhan, when Muhammad Ghaznavi was running, 17 times he had defeated him, and when he was running away, his soldiers asked him, "Hukum inhe khatam kar de." He says, "Bhagte hue to kya maare." And it cost us dearly. We all know what happened. So this chivalry school, this, based upon what I may call the Kshatriya tradition of war, Shaurya, valor, niti, ethical code, nyaya, yuddha, just war, all very good, all very grand principles. But I'm afraid in actual practice they cost us a great deal. The acharyas of the Kuta Yuddha school actually go back to Brihaspati, God, the preceptor of the gods, the Deva, Shukracharya, preceptor of the Asuras, right, or the Ahuras, and Ashwathama, the son of Dronacharya. When the war was over, he defied all the tenets of that era. He came at night, he slaughtered the children and the grandchildren of the Pandavas. He burned their camp. That is the kind of ferocity that you need. We may be a pacific people, and unfortunately, we have been set upon by people who are bestial. And we have paid a price, and to fight such people, you have to mirror their methods. Give it back to them in the same coin. I'm afraid ahimsa doesn't work there. Absolutely. So, the Brahmanical tradition set by Kautilya, who formalized these earlier acharyas, is based on reliance on information domination, covert action and destabilization before you strike, and then deception and disinformation. All this became part of the Indian lexicon. Next, please. There is the context of, sir, multipolarity. Patterns tend to persist and repeat themselves cyclically. Whenever in global history there has been a multipolar order, there has been war. World War I, multipolar order. World War II, multipolar order. And now that we are nearly heading for World War III, we have a multipolar order. So conflict is guaranteed. Conflict is guaranteed. The strange fact of Indian and Chinese history is that the Mahabharata was an era of multipolarity. There were 16 Mahajanapadas in India at the time of the Mahabharata, and also at the time of the Arthashastra of Kautilya. There were 16 Mahajanapadas constantly at war in India, multipolar power situation. China, the period of the warring kingdoms, 450 to 300 BC, is said to be a period of the warring kingdoms, an era of multipolarity. And the Chinese are quite clear that we have lots of lessons to learn from Sun Tzu, because this is an era of multipolarity. That is the common thread. And you see, by the time of the Mahabharata, the Indian armies had crystallized into four arms: Ratha, war chariots; the Gaja, the war elephants; and then the horse cavalry or the Ashwa, and the infantry or the Paditi. And this was in a multipolar power equation. This was the kind of armed structures all over these 16 Mahajanapadas. The format was something like a tournament. We will fight one another on the battle plain of Kurukshetra, on Panipat. All critical Indian battles, incidentally, have been fought on those same battle plains. Why will we get together there? Because our chariots can maneuver there. They can't go cross country. They can't go off the road axis. So we need a flat plain where the chariots can maneuver, and the main arm in that period was the chariots, the Maharathis, the great archers in the chariot who could kill hundreds and, as per this thing, thousands and thousands of people with their dexterity at using the bows and arrows. It was a good command and control platform, you see. And the Maharathis were the Kshatriyas. The Gajas, the elephants, were manned by Shudras. And you find that when the transition takes place in the time of Kautilya from the Rathas to the elephants, the kings are Mahapadmananda Shudra, and of course, Chandragupta Maurya Shudra. The caste equation shifts as the main fighting arm shifts. I'll talk of that a little later. So this was pure force on force oriented format. High levels of chivalry, no attacks on civilian, no fighting by night, and the use of vyuhas. And next slide, please. And you see, just take a look at these battle formations, sir. Ardhachandra Vyuha, Makara Vyuha, Shakata Vyuha, Chakra Vyuha. You see, and if you think these are outdated, by the way, in Asal Uttar 1965, this Chandra Vyuha, Ardha Chandra Vyuha, was the formation used. It was called horseshoe shaped formation. Eminent in Sibila, 100 Pakistani patterns were slaughtered inside the horseshoe. The Chinese used that Makara Vyuha, waves after waves after wave, to strike down one point and destroy it. They'll keep coming till it is destroyed. Shakata Vyuha was used by the Germans in World War II, by the Panzers. And that I will get into a little later. And Chakra Vyuha, we've all heard the story. Next, please. Now, between the Mahabharata and Arthashastra comes a major change. What was that change? The invasion of the Greek armies of Alexander. Here we came from an attrition-oriented paradigm to a mobility-oriented paradigm. From where did the Greeks come? Greece, Persia, Central Asia, Afghanistan, India. Look at that kind of a movement. They were not looking for any set-piece battlefield. And when Porus, a border chieftain, fought them on the banks of the Jhelum, they didn't look for any, please come where your chariots can function. They started the war by going up and down that Jhelum, and Porus sent his son with the chariots to stop them. The chariots got bogged down in the soggy banks of the river. The command element was separated from the soldiers, and we had to suffer a defeat. Ultimately, however, he had arrayed himself in that floodplain there in the Jhelum. He was about 30,000 troops. He was attacked by 1,40,000. All these stories that we heard of 40,000 Greeks beating, much larger hosts of Porus are poppy crap. The simple fact, even the Russian historians have now come to the fact, he had 70,000 Iranians and about 30,000 Central Asians. And they fought along with the 40,000 Greeks. One thing happened in this war. Ultimately, he was overwhelmed. But he had 200 war elephants. 200 war elephants, and they shook him up. They shook the Greeks up. They were terrified of these war elephants. You see, ultimately they did manage to prevail, but the shock of a new war weapon had shaken the Greek armies. Now, Kautilya was teaching at Takshashila, which is the National Defence College of India, was located at Takshashila, our NDU, first NDU. You were teaching there. Princes, ministers, senapatis and their sons, they were groomed at Takshashila. That was your NDC. When he heard of this invasion, he went forward himself and he saw the slaughter that the Greeks had inflicted on the civilians and what they had done to our women, and he thought this is a civilizational threat. So he went to Mahapadmananda, who had then had the largest army. Don't forget, Porus was just a small border chieftain. He had the largest army. He says, it is your duty, civilizational duty, to fight the Greeks, the Yamans. It is a civilizational challenge. Don't wait for him to come over the other 16 Janapadas to your border. And Mahapadmananda, as per the story you all know, was drunk. And he said, throw this stupid, idiotic Brahmin by the tuft of his hair out of my court. And as he was being thrown out, he turned around and told him, you are not fit to rule. Amazing for a Brahmin to get into the center of a court and say, you are not fit to rule, and I'll see that you go. Right? So he came back very angry from there. He refused to tie his tuft of his hair, but he went forward to where the Greeks were camped, and that was near the present cantonments of Tibur. That place was called by the Greeks. He went there. He sent his spies, his dutas, his charas, the dancing girls, the nautch girls, the madaris, the performers. They all were his informants. They went to the Greek camp, and they came back and reported to him they are terrified of the war elephants. The only talk in the Greek camp is, well, we don't want to go forward, the war elephants, Then Kautilya did something amazing. The first information warfare campaign of the world, the first major psychological warfare campaign that made a triumphant Greek army turn back and get out of India, refused to advance any further. They mutinied. How did he do that? He sent his spies, his the dutas, the charas, to go to the Greek camp and tell them, you guys have just seen 200 war elephants, and they are the shorter elephants of about 10 feet height. Just get to the east and you have Mahapadmananda. He actually had 3,000 elephants. He said, no, he has 9,000 war elephants, right? And they are bigger. They are trained to crush skulls by practicing on coconuts. They are trained to pick you in their trunk, throw you down so that your armor breaks. Once your armor breaks, they gore you with their tusks. Can you imagine the impact of these vivid imagery on the Greek soldiers? They mutinied. They refused to go forward. Alexander was a great orator. He harangued them for hours, but they refused. And he had no option but to withdraw outside along the Indus river and get the hell out of India. So from then, he realized clearly, Kautilya, that these chariots are a liability. They are a liability. We have to get to the elephants as the main shock arm. And we had to get to a more mobile way of fighting. And the elephant has mobility over the plains, over the mountains, over the deserts, over the forested areas, everywhere. So the elephant became the prime shock arm of Indian armies ever since Kautilya. And he changed it to a far more mobile format of war. And from then we have the shloka, where there are elephants, there is victory. The problem is that this lasted till the 10th century. By the time the firepower had come in, the cannons had come in, gunpowder had come in, and they shook up the elephants, and we should have changed by then, but we did not. But the fact is, we are talking of the era when the elephant ruled the roost. Next, please. We are told that we had no focused tradition of strategic thought, sir. Sir, may I direct the attention of all of you to the slide? And here you find that Kautilya had devised a method of net assessment which was called Saptanga, the Saptanga theory, or the 7-component theory. He divided every state into 7 major components, starting with the king, the Swami, the minister, the Amatyas, the army, the Danda, the forts, the Durga. The treasury, he said, is the most important. Economic power of the state is the most important. Then he talked of the territory and the people and their fighting spirit. And then he talked of who are the allies of this king. He devised every state into these 7 components and carried out a meticulous analysis of their capabilities. What is the personality of the king? Irritable, calm, excitable, etc. You see, what are his ministers like? How intelligent? What is the quality of their advice? Whom does the king trust? What is the inter se equation between the ministers? Who hates whom? You know, and all this was worked out. The army, the 4 components, not only the strength, their fighting spirit, their armament, bronze or of iron, etc., that had to be checked. You see, and then what is the economic capability of that state? So all this was done like we carry out net assessments today. And we are told there is no focused tradition of strategic thought. Think again. And this analysis, sir, was not only carried out for the the enemy king, the enemy's friend, and the enemy's friend's friend. So he sort of did a total 360-degree analysis of whoever is opposing him. Next, please. And then they had the mandala theory to evolve your grand strategy. That blue in the center is India, and then when you see the immediate on top is Pakistan and the sea is China. Now Pakistan abuts Afghanistan, and there will be always hostility between India and Pakistan, and therefore Afghanistan will always be hostile to Pakistan, and therefore there is a great congruence between India and Afghanistan. That was the way he analyzed whom to attack, when, what strategy to adopt was done by the mandala theory. Then we have the 4-4 means, the 4-4 means. What are my options? This is done from the Ramayana onwards. Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. Conciliatory policy, economic aid or inducement, bribes oblique payoffs, military force, and Bheda is to sow dissensions. But then he had something next which was even more elaborate system of analysis. This is called the Shadgunya theory. The 6 options that you have in statecraft. These were Sandhi, Vigraha, Asan, coercive diplomacy, alliance, Samsarya or alliance, and Dvaidi Bhav or double game. I just explain this to you with this next slide. Next. If you see this spectrum, sir, on one end is peace and on the other end is war. And in between are the various options. If you see the bottom line, he says enemy far stronger. Enemy far stronger, choose peace. Right? Power is balanced between the two, choose neutrality. Our enemy power is rising faster than your own. Choose alliances like Quad. Own power rising faster than the enemy, choose coercive diplomacy, choose parakram, choose coercion by the use of force, etc. If there is a confused multipolar power equation, then make peace with the one, strike the other. For instance, Hitler in the Second World War made peace initially with the Russia, the Molotov Pact, and he attacked the West, captured the whole of France, and then turned towards England, right? And then suddenly he switched sides and he attacked Russia. This is make peace with one, strike the other, right? And if the enemy is far weaker than you. Kautilya has no hesitation in saying, go for war right away, strike while the time is right. There are people in our country who like to tell us that we must help Pakistan. You know, it is in trouble. I'm afraid in a military man's book, we must go all out. This is the time, and I'm sure, hopefully, we will. Next, please. The modern military machine relied on the shock effect of 9,000 war elephants. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine if 9,000 war elephants were lined up and they came through Delhi. The entire population of Delhi would be south of Bihar, right? It still can have that shock effect. And then these elephants had excellent terrain mobility. Kautilya consciously tried to gain information dominance through a vast human intelligence network. In fact, the number of spies were so numerous that Majasanis thought they were a caste by themselves. That is the number of spies that we had in terms of human intelligence. All military campaigns, and this is I would like to stress, all military campaigns were preferred by a concerted action, covert action campaign of months, possibly years. Before he attacked a target, he would destabilize it. It's like judo, jiu-jitsu. Before you overthrow a powerful opponent, you have to break his balance before you attack. So he used a long period to destroy the politico-military balance of the opposing state, and he used espionage, subversion, sabotage, assassination, elaborate psychological warfare, information warfare operations, target the minds of the enemy commanders and decision makers, create dissonance, create suspicion. A favorite tactic in the Kautilyan period was that if the king relied very heavily on one particular minister, they sent a letter to him purporting to be from the minister with to address to the neighboring king, ki help me, I'll help you overthrow this man. So the king had the minister reduced in height by 6 inches by slitting his throat, and just at the time of war, he lost his most trusted advisor. Right? And like I said, all ground invasions were prefaced by a military invasion, by this covert action phase, lasting for months, even years. Right? And only when he felt that this extended subversion, destabilization campaign had shaken up the enemy, did he resort to kinetic action. And that kinetic action was short and brief, like a blitzkrieg, just a mopping up in the wake of the intelligence covert action campaign. Next, please. This is how he captured the whole of India in just 25 years. India is the size of the European subcontinent, right? Nobody has been able to unify the European subcontinent till date, right? He did it in 25 years. 25 years because of this phase. Curiously, ladies and gentlemen, here I come to the end of my presentation. In the 1971 war, unconsciously, the Kautilyan model resurfaced. How? Take a look. You see, the Liberation War of 1971. Mukti Bahini, 8 months, 9 months of operation that harassed the Pakistani army in the east. The revolt of the Mukti Bahini did that covert destabilization phase, and they provided us with a lot of information. Next, please. Then, when we carried out the operation finally, right, in 3rd of December, when we started the offensive, we used helicopters, we used paradrops, we used tanks to speed up the operations. We bypassed all centers of resistance and we headed 550 kilometers for Dhaka. And in 14 days, our armed forces had captured Dhaka, courtesy that intense destabilization campaign which had shaken up the Pakistani army. We used the air power for shock and awe, and this is one of the greatest victories of the Indian state since Kautilya. 90,000 prisoners of war surrendered. We broke Pakistan in two, created a new nation state with the force of arms. And last, so what is there to take away from our history? We've always had mass armies. Chandragupta Maurya had an army of 690,000 strong. the Mughal army was 2.5 million strong, because Akbar's thesis was that let me suck out the recruitable male population. Anybody who can go against me, let me get him in my pay. Right? In World War I, we contributed 1.3 million men to the British Empire's wars, and in World War II, 2.5 million men. And at about 1.1 million, we are still the third largest armed forces in the world. And unfortunately, we still have a penchant for attrition. Whenever we have moved to maneuver, like in the Kautilyan period, like in Samudragupta's period, like in Peshwa Bajirao's campaign, we've done very well. But when we have gotten stuck onto our attrition mindset, it may look very nice and very ethical, but it doesn't serve the interest of the country. We need to consciously develop a maneuver warfare orientation. We are slow to change and adapt. That must change. And we are culturally primed to strong point, nodal point defenses, rather unlike the Chinese, which are premised on the Great Wall of China, and all their lines on the sea are also linear aspects of warfare. The Kautilyan paradigm unconsciously emerged during 1971, and we should now adopt it as our military doctrine. Thank you, sir.